with you at the time. That's been the same procedure for a long time. So what we had been doing, for the sake of those back in the craft who will be listening to this tape, we were talking about changing the procedure on how the candle was lit. Meaning somebody put some water in the candle, and because the human told them of the procedure, and they did it before checking the fleas. Now, it sounds like just a minor thing, but...
And we know that it was
Lucifer
changed.
thought he wasn't doing anything bad either, when he tried to...
We know that then a consensus was taken and you decided not to do it. But the point, in the meantime, universe exploded because you went against the procedure.
Rain and water don't, fire and water don't do. Maybe we can move down so we make the line sun would be resting.
Sorry. Yes, it's working now.
What we want you all to do is to begin to develop the habit of planning your strategy before you do anything. Let's take, for instance, you're going on a walk up here in retreat, and you have to put on some human clothing, and you have a turtleneck on, almost all of you have, and so you know that sweaters and turtlenecks don't mix, right? Or did you all hear that procedure? Okay, and let's say that you think now, I guess I'm going to have to take my turtleneck off, or I can't wear a sweater, one or the other, right? But would you go in and just start putting on clothing without thinking about it? The answer to that is no, you wouldn't. Your name is Shauna Kinsey. In other words, this applies to anything. If you're going on a supply run, you do plan your strategy the night before on who is going, and what you're going to purchase, and where you're going to go, and how much money you need, right? But do you really analyze it enough to know how you're going to handle the circumstances all the way? Let's use the butter, for instance, that came up when Jacoby went on the supply run with Elvis, I guess, right? Or was it prior to the supply run? Well, it doesn't matter. Let's say that it happened. It didn't happen on the supply run? No, but you saw the butter before, and you asked about it, so that may not be a good example.
No, it is a good example, because if I understand it right, Chakotay assumed that since some unsalted butter that Lynx had gotten, or that they had gotten in the retreat, since it was a lighter colored butter, that it was more right than and maybe therefore fresher than a darker colored butter. And I don't know where that idea came from. It came from Chakotay. But this is a good example of how things, your own mind can enter in and change things. In other words, I think the comment, if I'm not mistaken, was made, I think Lynx wants us to get lighter colored butter because it's fresher.
Or we always buy Land O'Lakes, which is really the only kinds you can get here.
That's the reason we buy Land O'Lakes, because that's the only unsalted butter we see here. And
I've seen the whipped unsalted butter in little cartons,
but just because that Land O'Lakes unsalted butter is lighter in color doesn't mean a blooming thing. It doesn't mean that it's fresher than some other brand that you might get that might color their butter darker.
Don't you all get it at the dairy? So it couldn't be old.
No.
So anyway, but the most important thing that I was getting at was you plan your strategy before you do anything. Lagoti's a good example. When we were trying to get to a place, to buy a place for you all to craft, we gave the task to Lagodi on how we could go about doing it. And his brain started working. And he started thinking we could do this, 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 and this, and if this happens, then we can do this, and so on. Well, he trained his mind to do that when he was in the human world, which was a good characteristic. Now, he's got to convert that way of thinking over to the next level way of thinking because it's a good way to think. If I do this, then I do this, and if this happens, then I do this. In other words, nothing just happens in the next level.
Let me see if I can use this as
Okay.
an example. We asked Lagodi to get a check partner and write down the things that were procedures for changing the oil.
It's in this graph.
And, well, I assume, because I didn't say an umbrella. And first of all, he made a mistake because he got Mercoti as a check partner. Because Mercoti is not on the crew of changing the oil. As far as we're concerned, changing the oil with Lagodi, we're talking about changing the oil at the retreat. And in our minds, it doesn't jive. And we'll show you why. Because humans would think a procedure for changing the oil would be a procedure for changing the oil. Now let's see how Lagodi worked this out with Mercoti as his check partner. Well, you better read it. I can't read his writing. We'll turn this around.
Use the check partner who has the most experience in that task.
Correct. Okay. Now, do you understand what that means? Lagodi understands, but let's say that, like in this craft, there's a procedure that Lagodi has to be present on all vital signs tasks. That he can get someone else from the crew to be his check partner. But we have noticed a time or two on vital signs type things, like changing the oil, for example, that he might choose a check partner who knew less about that particular task than some other check partner might have known that had been available. And in our mind, for vital signs, supply planners, anything that you're doing, normal procedure is always to get, as a check partner, the person available who would know the most about that particular task. Plus, there's one assigned, like Lagodi is assigned to vital signs. So as a check partner, if he's going to change the oil, for example, he would go and get someone who would be most likely to have familiarity with changing the oil on that particular car or changing the oil in general. But he wouldn't get, as a check partner, the least likely person who has had experience at that task. And that should always be the way it is. Okay, that's number one.
And two people doing a task then would set aside time that they would have to do it. Like it would take 45 minutes approximately to do the oil, and we would establish that time, set that time up to do the task.
Okay.
Okay, the second thing then is to see that we have the proper tools for the task. Get them out, make a list of what we need to do to change the oil, plus what we put in the car. Those times we have the proper equipment to do the task.
Okay.
And like oil, filter, and so on. The proper wrench, like it's a 1916 wrench, which we
Keep
need
going.
to. Once we've established.
The only thing he said at this point that is important is a check partner that would be the one to know the most about what he's doing, plus getting the tools all out in order to do the task.
We have 5 quarts of oil, we make sure because that's the requirement for Z-Car. We have at least 5 quarts of new oil, plus filter.
Okay.
To do the task. Okay. We would get the keys to the car, open them, open that hood and what have you. And then the first thing we do is drain the oil into the oil pan. We have a disposable pan which we put our waste oil in. That's step number 1, is to drain that.
Disposable pan?
Well, it's the pan that we use to dispose the oil from. Yes, the pan is disposable.
Okay. quickly.
Okay, second thing then is to, after it's drained a while and the good portion goes out, then the next thing we do is remove the old filter
Okay.
and drain the oil, because there's usually a quart of oil that's in the filter. Drain that out and then also clean the unit with paper towels, the oil filter unit itself. There's a lot of excess old oil that collects in the oil unit filter.
Okay.
The second thing then is to get the new filter and then put a small amount of oil on the rubber gasket it has as a seal and install the new filter to where it's just tight. We tighten it 3/4 of a turn more.
Okay. Keep going.
Okay, next thing we do is after all of the oil is drained out of the pan to where it's quit dripping, then we wipe it off and reinstall the plug. Once again, tighten it securely. Then add 5 quarts of oil to the engine. In the unit in the engine, remove the cap with the valve cover. That's where the oil goes. Install 5 quarts of oil. Then the next thing we do is start the engine and run it for about 5 minutes to fill up the filter. It takes a quart of oil to fill the filter. Then we'd have to rerun it for about 5 minutes. We let it set for about 4 or 5 minutes and then check the dipstick to see where the oil is and if it's adequately full, just as a double check. But the procedure for normally checking the oil is to do it after the engine's run for a while, like when Lynx comes back. We wait 5 minutes and then check the oil according to full inspection.
Go ahead.
That's the procedure.
Is that the end of it?
Well, you did it all
Okay.
wrong.
But then we dispose of
I
the
took
oil
it away
after
from
that.
him before he had a chance to finish because he was getting so lengthy. Okay, now, did everybody listen to that?
Is that done?
Yeah, I know they did. Did everybody listen to that? Which ones did he list that came from older members? Which ones did he list that came from older members? Hey, Rody? Did you check for it? Okay. Okay. The reason we're separating what instructions you got from older member from the instructions that go with the task, because the instructions that come from the older members are a higher priority. Now, how many instructions did he leave out that are higher priority than the ones that he mentioned? And the ones who are in this craft should know the answers to that more than the ones who aren't part of the crew in this craft. Kadoti?
Is the time that they're going to select to do it going to be a considerable thing? I guess it will be like it's 25.
Okay, let's say that we gave the instruction that they change the oil first thing in the morning. Then what instructions have we left out?
Proper time to do that according to Lynx schedule. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it until after juice. As a minimum starting time.
Is that correct? Okay, but it sounds to me like you could do the things up to that point prior to juice. Now see, the point we're making is they have an instruction that says you don't interfere with Lynx meditation until Lynx has called for juice. Starting the garage door sounds like spacecraft has come up under the ground in the house, or either a locomotive has just run through Lynx quarters when you open the garage door. It's an unbelievable disturbance. It's impossible to think about anything until the garage door has stopped making its noise, and then you replace everything in the room back on its shelves before you can go on. Okay, so we have an instruction in this craft that they wouldn't do things in vital signs. The point we're making is that Lagodi, first of all, I called him and said, before we have this meeting, you get a check partner and write down as quickly as you can a list of things that would be procedures for changing oil. And first of all, he went to the wrong person, because he went to someone who's not on crew here. And he thought of it in terms of human changing oil. Or let's say that the human aspects of changing oil were more dominant than the next level aspects. Or he certainly wouldn't have asked someone who doesn't reside in this craft, because they wouldn't know how to be check partner, except for the human aspects, or the next level, or the older member aspects that would apply in any craft. Certainly that wouldn't apply here. But even a higher priority than the older member aspects of the BIST would be this particular craft, because it would have additional instructions. In other words, you all have your priorities backwards. You have your task priorities, and then your general instructions that older members might have added to those task priorities, and then your particular craft changes to those priorities. Those are all backwards. The particular craft priorities should be number one. The other older members' additions to the procedures number two. And the way the human aspects of the task would be applied to that task would be number three. But you all automatically do that in reverse. You go to the task and think of how it is that I'm going to do this, and then you say, now I've got to inject in that the instructions that the older members have given to me. And then you go and add into that, I've also got to include the craft that I'm residing in, if that alters any of that. All three of those you have backwards. And this should apply to anything that you do. Your first, to us, the all-changing procedures are, in our mind, before we ever got around to thinking oil or tools or cans, we think of the procedures that Lynx has given to them regarding anything in the garage or related to a car. That, first of all, if I am going to open the car doors, I have to do it in a way that it doesn't explode the walls, because in that garage, with the outside doors closed, if you open a car door and close it, the compression in there reverberates the whole craft. So we have instruction in this craft that if you're opening and closing car doors, it has to be done with extreme caution. And we have another instruction that has to do with you can't start an engine without the door being open. Have another instruction that you wouldn't open or close the garage doors prior to juice. Now, to us, those would be number one on your list. Yes, of the noise that it would take to go in and out of the door, any door that would have to open or close, even from the hallway into the garage where you're going to do your task. Now, those things are first in our mind. And second in our mind would be any instructions regarding changing of oil, like getting a check partner and laying out all your tools. Those would be the second things we would think about. And the last things we would think about would be cleaning out the filter chamber and lubricating the, do you see what I'm saying? The particular requirements of the task. Can you all get this in your right place? So you've got to sit down in your meditation, and whenever it, or not only in your meditation, but anything else, and think about everything I can think about, and let me see if I can switch those around. Let me see if I can get the highest priorities as my first thoughts, and think about the mundane human ways of handling the task as the last things I have to think about. In other words, those are the things that Lynx hasn't filled us in on, the instructions that are on the that are in regard to the particulars of how many minutes to wait after you've added the oil before you start the engine, or do you see what I'm saying? Those are the things way down the line. It's the things that have been particularly put into motion that may have nothing to do with changing the oil. That would be the top priority. You all understand that? And this is the way we want you to get your computers changed over. Now, the other day we asked Lebody, interrupt me and want to, we asked the crew up here. Lebody responded, and she scared me to death. And I'm exaggerating. We said, what in the world would your experiment be? We were talking about how the crew at times unconsciously, both at the retreat and at Penrose Craft, it has become too dependent upon their teachers, not consciously, but unconsciously, to straighten out things that might go wrong in an experiment. Instead of having enough forethought in your preparation and your strategy of an experiment to not have to worry about things needing to be straightened out. There's an unconscious dependency upon links to straighten out mistakes that you make. Consciously, you think you plan your strategy. You think you even do it thoroughly, even though we know that you can think of things to make it more thorough, so that you wouldn't ever have times when you would leave a range top on after you've taken a pot off, or things similar to that, or put rolls in the oven and realize an hour and a half later we didn't turn the oven on. In other words, there are ways that you can cover those things and not have them happen. When we say that a crew that's working in the lab, every single member of the crew is responsible for every single thing that happens, it means that I may not be a part of whipping the mashed potatoes, but I'm a part of that experiment, and I automatically, at a certain number of minutes prior to knowing that those mashed potatoes have to be prepared, I automatically can't help but be aware whether or not the mashed potatoes, the beater has started going. And I automatically have glanced over to see if the tools are there or if the items are there that they have needed in order to do that. I don't go over and ask them and interfere with their task, but I see that those things are happening. Now, the question we brought up to the crew was, what if Lynx left last night on the spacecraft? What would your experiment today be like? And Lebody said probably the biggest mess we'd ever made, or something similar to that. At least that's what it seemed to me. And I think she was joking or thinking, but the point is, think about that for a second. Let's say that you at retreat saw Lynx leave last night in a spacecraft. That you saw them leave in a spacecraft. Here was the day after, and you were preparing experiments. And you may have not rested much because of the experience that you had had the night before of seeing them leave. But you're approaching an experiment. Now, if I were in your place, I would think the only reason we didn't go last night is we have some sharpenings to do on our effort, on our desire and effort to do things precisely as they should be done. And therefore, you would never have seen the seriousness of my effort before that you would see that today in the preparation of that experiment. And my determination at any day prior to that on having a perfect experiment couldn't even compare with my determination that day, because from that day on, I would be trying to say, maybe this day I can prove that what I do is acceptable, so that T&O will turn that craft around and come back and get me, because the only reason I didn't go. Now, whether the reason is right or not, it would be right for you to think that way, that the only reason I didn't go on that craft last night is because I still have some growing to do in effort. We brought up the fact to this crew, and I don't know if we had it on tape or not, maybe we did, of what is the reason that you're on Earth? What was the reason that you, as young members in the next level, were brought to Earth and in these vibrations and in these vehicles? If you could sum it up in a nutshell. And the answer was to gain strength, to have dependability, to be strong enough that you can be counted on to do things, rather than easily swayed by some human that would have you put water in the candle holder before you check and go through procedures, or whatever the object is that could have you swayed. So what we want you to do is realize that the whole thing I've got to do is demonstrate strength, demonstrate that I can know my teachers' minds, that I can do things the way they would have us do them, and that I'm not going to accept anything that would discourage me. Things that would appear to be discouragement would only whet my appetite for wanting to prove even that much more that I can do those things in the right way. Now, you want to add anything? Should we change the subject and talk a minute about correcting some terminology? Do you think I covered that?
Do you all feel like you know what we're saying? In other words, everything that you do, you can't do out of habit. An older member does not ever do anything out of habit. They do it with a complete going over the instructions in their mind. It may only take a second or two to do it, but you would never go in and do something half asleep or in a dazed state or lethargic state or what other kind of state. Any kind of state that you can get into where you're not alert.
Or going in, improvising, going
weakness.
in, doing it as you go along, a step at a time.
That's a form of weakness, and a member of the next level is not weak in that way. It's just like if you had an out-of-crack task, and you treated your out-of-crack task like you treat some of the tasks in your main craft, I doubt very seriously if you would have your job done. Now, I can't think of anything in particular that you all do, but I think you all can think of some ways that you all handle things.
Well, now, I can read some thoughts right here that you need to let the lesson we just gave you correct, because I can see that you might tend to the human aspects of the experiment in the lab as well or better as you would the human aspects of a similar task in your out-of-craft task. But remember, we just had a lesson that your priorities are wrong. Do you see what we're saying? Am I coming across? Not? You don't understand? Okay, to us, when you're in the lab, the success of the lab experiment is not the end result. The end result is a minor aspect. To your out-of-craft task, the success of your task is the end result. We care about your end result, but not nearly as much as we care about how you arrived at the end result. Humans don't really care that much about how you arrived. They care more about the end result. Next level cares about how you went about each step before the end result, and they have so much more importance than the end result. But they are so important that if you did all the steps right, the end result's automatic. And the end result's perfect, automatic. If you did all of the steps along the way with a great amount of importance, if you had the proper check partners, the proper attitude, the tools out, if the objects for the experiment were fresh and they were cared for properly, and the lettuce wasn't too wet, and everything that has been given to you as ways of handling the experiment. If all the little aspects are handled as procedures, not as preparing a task or preparing an experiment. if they're simply procedures and you do all the procedures right, the end result is beautiful, automatically. Even if the end result is a total flop, because we gave you something wrong in procedures and you put cinnamon in instead of allspice, then your job was perfect if you put that amount of cinnamon in instead of allspice. Do you see what we're saying? Even though the end result might not even be consumable. But if you did it precisely the way it was given you to do. Now, you have, on the other hand, a procedure that says if what we have given you might have been misinterpreted and you recognize the misinterpretation, you would try to call it to our attention. Like if someone knew that they just couldn't imagine that Lynx intended cinnamon instead of allspice, then they would try not to let that machinery go to its completion without checking it out. Can you follow that? Because that's also a procedure. That you try to also be aware of what it is that we were trying to do. And that if something comes in as an obvious, out of place, a kink or a misinterpretation, or maybe we even say that we wrote down for the cinnamon, and but you had in mind what you thought you got from us, what we had in mind as an end result. It wouldn't be wrong to question us rather than destroy the experiment. Can you understand that? But you've got to get the procedures, the next level procedures, more important than cook the meat and wash the dishes and put it on the table. You know, that's the way the humans do it. So it's excuse me, go ahead.
I was going to say a good example of this is what happened with the snow tires prior to the crew, 3 individuals who came up here the other day. Doe had given an instruction. First, it's against the law to have snow tires with studs in them in Texas. I mean, you can't. They ruin the highway according to Texas.
They fine you.
And so therefore, it's against the law. Now, we thought everybody knew it up here. And that unless you saw on television or saw a headline on the newspaper where it said snow tires are now legal in Texas, then you would not use them in Texas under any circumstances. We never want you to break the law.
Now, we gave a procedure over the telephone to the Amarillo craft that since snow tires are illegal, and since with studs, and since Q-Car has snow tires with studs, that if Q-Car has to come back during icy, snowy condition, that they could use the snow tire with studs only if they could get out of the state prior to daylight.
That's the only time you would use it.
Now, we came back in on top of that and gave another instruction, and that was, since we were afraid of you driving in the dark under snowy, icy conditions, that you could not leave under icy, snowy conditions until dawn. Now, what should those two instructions add up to you in your mind? That you put the snow tires on at dawn and drive them out of the state? No? Well, what can you do then? What if there's snow and ice on the roads and you've got Q-Car?
In Texas.
When that happened, I thought I would check.
That's right, because you do have an instruction. You have another instruction that says if you're going to be an hour late, you call the retreat craft. Now, if Q-Car, if the people who are going to come in Q-Car awaken in order to head up here, and they awakened at 4 a.m., say, for example, and the roads were not clear, and so they had to abide by the instruction, couldn't leave till dawn. But they can't put snow tires on because they have to abide by the instruction that can't put snow tires on with studs unless they can get out of the state before daylight. But they said for us to come back tomorrow. So what does that mean? That means I've got a dilemma. I don't know how to get out of town. because we also had an instruction that you couldn't drive unless the roads were dry. This was in Q-Car that left at dawn. So the only thing they could do is call and say, what do we do? And we'd say, wait till the next day, or the next day, whatever it took. Now, S-Car, what can S-Car do coming to retreat? When can they leave? They can leave at dawn. At
So
dawn.
let me ask, because according to the three who put the snow tires on in Amarillo, they said the instructions had changed and there was a different procedure in the book. And I'd like to know what that procedure was that you read. You took her word for it? Don't ever take her word, Jim.
What did you think you read?
What did you mean? I thought.
How can you read it?
So I went to the book because I thought I was reading it, but such a change to it. Well, what it said was the Q-Car couldn't miss you. They had 70 of them put snow tires on before the right hand on the road. So
Is that true? Is that in the book?
I read it.
Is that in the book?
I read it again.
Did you question? Okay, let's go a little further. You took her word for it.
Right.
She influenced you.
Mm-hmm.
Is it worth it?
Like
No,
that
I'm
apple.
serious. I mean, this is the way
Yeah.
you should think. Because you don't want, it was against what we said. What you should have done was, well, I don't know, I better check that book out.
I think you read it hastily, and your brain put the instruction
Because
together.
according to Mercodi, he put it down like I
Yeah.
told him to. And it doesn't say anything about Q-Car.
Or doesn't say that you can put the snow tires on to dawn. Right? Is that correct? That's what you think? Okay, we don't know. We don't know.
We don't have
We won't know the answer to this till we find out what's in the book.
But the most important thing is learning this lesson.
That's right.
In other words, Lagodi and Livodi knew that we said snow tires with studs were illegal in Texas. The only exception was if you could leave at 4 a.m. and get out of the state before daybreak, that it would be okay. We don't like to do that because the police probably know what snow tires sounds like as you pass them, and probably are looking for those kind of things and would probably pull you over if you happen to pass one. If he's awake that time of the morning when he's on duty, then he might catch you. But we feel like the chances are very slight. Now, knowing those things, when Livodi told you differently, what you should have done was become alert and say, now wait a minute, that doesn't jive. Why?
Let's
What
read the book
has
together.
caused them to change their mind?
That's right.
These are the things that this kind of thinking is what we want you to begin to develop.
And if I went and read the book and it was confusing to me, and Mercodi has his initials on receiving it from links over the telephone, then I'd wake Mercodi up and say, what's the deal? Huh?
I wondered why they were doing it, but I just,
It doesn't make sense.
I had to just.
You were present when they were doing it?
I saw the car move in front of the wall. That's when I walked out to figure out what was happening.
See, somebody's mind was thinking.
And what made you think it was okay to put them on?
Did you not say? Did you receive that instruction in the book? What did you say? Oh, well, if that's what they're doing, I guess that's what their instructions were. In other words, let's go and use another example. Sarah Fody and Alex Fody on the candle. Okay? Sarah Fody knew it wasn't a procedure, right? To put water in the candle or in the little thing with you. Alex Fody could have said, he did write the report, and hopefully he didn't do it without checking with you. Now, if you had been mentally alert as a member of the next level, you would have said, I'm sorry, Alex Fody, if Alex Fody suggested it to you. I can't be a party to that because it has not been cleared with the older members who are here with us at this time.
To fill in all those who are listening to this tape, Alex Odie, with somebody else, asked the woman at the candle shop, what can we do to keep the glass from breaking? And the lady at the candle shop said, well, you can put a little water, and that she heard at some meeting or something, you can put a little water at the bottom of the candle. And he wrote a report on it and had a check partner doing it, I think. And then he had Sarah Bodie as a check partner when they tried it once, even though they later decided that it wasn't a procedure, it didn't come through links, and so they vetoed it. In the meantime, a universe exploded. And that's the point we're making, that you don't do things and then later discover you've been off base.
It's the lethargic brain that really gets to you. In other words, it's, if that's what you want to do, go ahead. Oh, yeah, sure. Well,
or the way people are check partners without taking it seriously and digging into it very quickly into, is this correct?
In other words, to use your feeler. If Lagodi had used his feeler when Lagodi told him something, first she shouldn't have told him anything, because the way she interprets things may be entirely different than the way the book read. And what she should have done was say, maybe I'm wrong. I may be wrong, but I might be reading this differently than what what the instruction was in the book. Maybe you ought to read it and see what you think. But you've got to develop a feeler when something doesn't seem right. And that's the
I can even see if your effort had been in the right place of staying in confusion long enough to be an hour late and call things to see what to do. Because let's say that I read the instruction and it was confusing. And because it conflicted. Two instructions seem to conflict. Then I go to my check partner and I say, they seem to conflict to me. Why don't you come read them with me? And we both read them. They seem to conflict. Let's go get Mercodi. He wrote them down. And let's see if he can straighten out the confusion. And if he can't, by then, you're calling us to see what to do. Because you can't decide what to do since there seems to be conflict and misinterpretation, and you're going to be an hour late from now.
And then to stop in New Mexico and take the snow tires off, when it was legal to use tires in New Mexico, doesn't make sense to me. Unless we had given you an instruction not to use the snow tires on just plain old highway. If that was the case, we wouldn't be using our snow tires all the time. Because we put mileage on those snow tires every day, and very seldom do we run across any ice, except leading from the retreat to the main highway. You see what we're saying? It's excess work. We don't want you all doing anything extra that you don't have to do. But you've got to develop a reasoning and alert mind when you are doing something and your brain is, sure, okay, yeah, it's all right. Whatever you want to do is, sure, water in the candle. Whatever it is, that is not a way a member of the next level.
Another thing
that's not a habit.
That gets in your way is time deadlines. The time deadlines should be abided by, but only if you've done your homework preparing to that time deadline. Let's say you're thinking of leaving at dawn, and you hadn't clearly worked this out in your strategy prior to dawn. Then you're going to make wrong decisions at dawn. Do you see what I'm saying? It's the same thing if you're doing a lab experiment, a new lab experiment, and you're trying to get it out by 11:30. And you were slight on some of the things that you needed to cover in your strategy, then the procedures are going to suffer in order to get it out at 11:30. And this you shouldn't have to do. You shouldn't have to sacrifice and have the time delayed, even though it would be better to delay the time than break the prior procedures.
That has always been procedure. If you find that you cannot get it out on time,
according to procedure,
then it is delayed. When you're in the retreat here where our older members reside, then all you need to do is pick up the caller and say, our experiment has been delayed a little bit, and let us know. That's all. Now, once you do delay, you do have your experiment delayed, what do you do the next day? Right, you try to correct it, but you don't continually have it.
No, but it would be better to have it late and have all your procedures covered.
But do
That's
one
what I'm
or two of you work real fast and make everybody a nervous wreck just to get it off on time? Isn't that a human way of doing things? Yes, it is. We would, the only thing that we delight in, delight in, if we can use that word, is seeing you all perform as members of the ministry. When you start our day with doing things out of habit and without making an effort to follow procedures, it just about makes us feel like we wish we could go find a hole and crawl into it. Because it's discouraging. Remember when we had these computer books and goodness, pages were so thick. Those were all instructions given to you by the ministers. We have given you procedures. And the only way you receive procedures is by it coming through us. And that means we spend an awful lot of effort giving you procedures. Now, why do you think we do that? Because we like to talk? Because we like to spend a lot of energy talking to you? Because we enjoy the teacher role and it's so much fun? And it's none of those things. It's because we want you to take those procedures and apply them. And we thought that's what you would do. But you cannot. You cannot remember everything we say. And you cannot remember everything that we say without a conscious effort to remember it. And the only way you can do that is to write down those procedures and study them until they are in your programmer so strongly that you can't forget it. And every time you come upon a circumstance like that, then you take the procedure and try to apply it. But you don't take your human mind and do it without any thought. Now, all of the things that are showing up to me, and I feel like to know also, is where you all need to do some work. And that is putting procedures into effect. You do not think before you act. And goodness, you will appreciate that procedure once you get it through. You will see older members never doing a spontaneous thing without thinking about it first. We don't. Went out on some errands prior to coming in here, and we thought about what we wanted to cover with you while we were gone. We didn't come in here and sit down and just start talking. And it's true, we do get some information at times, most of the times when we're talking to that it's new to us. But we know where it's coming from, and it makes an awful lot of sense to us, and we certainly aren't going to shut them off by saying, now wait a minute, I hadn't thought that out yet, because we do know any boogers, feelings, and consequences, shutting them as fast as we can. But the most important thing, if you all would write it down at the top of your list that you're using to program your vehicle is think before you say something. Think before you begin to do something. A lot of damage can be done in the name of God. Do things spontaneously. If Lucifer had thought before he did something, he would never be where he is today. If Adam had thought before he did something, he would not have happened to get the same.
develop this
That's why you
purpose
are
that
here.
you're here, is to develop this effort, this strength, so that you will be able to insert that forethought and to examine things and do them in a correct way, to have that much desire to do things in the right way. Otherwise, the best you could do would be to be just an apprentice who could simply, at a command, lay out the tools. You wouldn't have learned how to think, or how to try to apply instructions as a member of the next level.
Let's say you have an autocrat task. You finish your autocrat task and you come back to the main craft after you've completed it. A human says, oh boy, I'm tired, I think I'll sit down and rest a little while. A member of the main level says, I'm glad that phase of my work is completed. I wonder what I can do here. What do I have to do here? You don't think of yourself as being tired. You might be aware of some tiredness, but a human has to take a nap or rest. Maybe 2 naps, if they can do it.
Actually, returning to the craft should be a little stimulus to you, because you should be more comfortable there and like the kind of work that goes on there better than you like the kind of work that you have to do at your task. And that stimulus should give you some energy.
And do you notice what you can do as an individual? Do you try to function as a responsible member of that craft, or do you just let somebody else do it? I don't really want an answer. I want you to think in these terms, because you are a member of the next level 24 hours every day, 7 days. You cannot be a member of the next level only when you want to be, and you want to play the game that way. Now, I think we've talked enough about it, that there's a lot of information in here as far as how you can improve your performance, and we hope that you will put it into action.
We might talk to you a little later after your experiment on that topic. This was a little work. Are we ready? Coyote says we're ready. I don't know if we are. Are we all, MKHs? Okay. We want to talk to you a minute about, a little bit about dating. He started to talk a second about, what's the name?
You've made a button.
That's okay. That's all right. It's Dave. We said a little earlier, and we want to clarify a little bit more, or maybe help you understand a little bit better, that the purpose of your coming here was to gain strength. There are several ways that you can gain strength. It's like if you're a young member next level, the thing that you need the most is next level maturity, right? So that you can be responsible, so that you can do things according to next level ways, and have a little something that you can contribute in service. Now, let's take, contrary to what we may have said a long time ago, T and I think that it's very likely that Jesus and Jesus' disciples, which we're not saying we know how many there were, but we believe that those that completed what they were to do in their task of gaining strength, that they went back to the next level. In other words, that they came from the next level the same as you, and that their task was their method of gaining strength was to go out and preach the way Jesus had taught them to preach, even to the point of getting themselves hated, thrown in prison for things they didn't do, and and to even get themselves martyred. It's not that martyrdom wasn't that important, but it was that Jesus set the example for them in saying what he said, and openly saying it, even to the hostility building up. And then right before he went to finish off his martyrdom, he kind of said to the next level, now, goodness, I hope I'm doing right. I don't want to finish this off without a first-hand meeting of helping me understand that I am to go through and finish this off the way I think I am to go through and finish this off. And at that point, he had a meeting with a couple of members of the next level. They said, "That's right. You're on the right track, and you're doing what you're supposed to do." So as soon as he had that meeting, he went ahead and finished off what he was supposed to finish off. He probably thought that they would extract his spirit, so to speak, from his vehicle before he had suffered quite to the extent that he had suffered, hanging on the cross. And probably that's what provoked, why have you forsaken me? Here I am. I thought you were going to come get me, so to speak. And yet, he had to go ahead, and in the next level, or after it was over, and probably the severity of it didn't amount to that much to him. But nevertheless, we feel like he set that example. Now, he came, T and I have recently read some very, very old documents of writings that Gnostic Christians have had. I don't know if you know anything about Gnostic Christians, but it's kind of an old sect of Christians that they were Gnostics before there was Jesus, and yet when Jesus came, they accepted Jesus as being who he was, and then they became Gnostic Christians. In other words, in Jewish time, there were Gnostics, and they believed that all matter was evil, and that essentially their basic beliefs are similar to what you understand, that you have to overcome this world, and you have to overcome matter, physical body being part of matter, and everything in the world. And they also believe that you have to become androgynous. You can't be male or female. That you have to live only for one purpose, and that's to please God. And these were the beliefs of this group. Now, some of the disciples and close associates of Jesus, their families and all, were Gnostics. And then after Jesus left, they continued with their teachings and all, except they incorporated the teachings of Jesus. And some of the old manuscripts that have been hidden, but are authentic, but were not found until not found by the public, or not, let's say, published so that the public could see them until recently. And T and I got a hold of one of the publications that has taken all of these secret Gnostic manuscripts and published them. And one was a letter that James wrote, James, the brother of Jesus, when we can tell in reading the letter that it's authentic. There's no doubt about it that it's authentic, because nobody but members of the next level would know what in the world Jesus was talking about. Poor James didn't know even what he was talking about, even though he recorded it as carefully as he could record it. But the point is that Jesus came and visited James some 550 days after his resurrection, or after his crucifixion. So anyhow, it had been over a year, almost a year and a half, when he visited with him, and he said to him a lot of other things, but one of the things that he said to him was, you have become much too comfortable. Not only you, but you must tell the others that were following and were trying to do my teachings that they have gotten too much into prophecy and that the things that you're into that people come to you for and they like, and you've forgotten that you've got to do exactly what I did. You've got to say the kind of things that I taught you that you know the public cannot accept, that will get you hated of men as much as I was hated of men, and get you thrown in prison without just reason or just cause, and get you even to lose your life for that same reason. Even though don't misunderstand that, it wasn't that they were after their being ordered. It was they knew the society and knew that that would come as a result. And the lesson plan was, can you have the courage, can you get the teachings down enough that you can have the courage to leave your villages, your families, the things that were part of you in the world, and can you have the courage to go out and preach those things even where you know that eventually it will lead to your being done in. In other words, that process, that bravery, that courage, when they had to do it on faith, that it would result in their getting back to the kingdom of heaven. Even though they didn't understand as much about the kingdom of heaven as you understand, with two people present in physical bodies to help you understand what you understand about the kingdom of heaven. But the disciples did have to develop their strength and develop their faith to the degree of persistently, even however many years it took them to preach what they knew was the truth and separate themselves from the world, knowing that it would only lead to the end of their life. Now, this doesn't by any means mean that that's what you're to do. And so don't confuse the issues, and don't even start meditating on, I wonder if that's what we should be doing. This is an entirely different experiment. And is gaining strength by different methods. This is a different lesson plan altogether, but strength is still the end result, the thing that must be gained. And don't forget, when Jesus visited with James, he said, look, you all have got to stop being so into writing all these pleasant things that you were writing, and you're drawing on me, so I have to keep coming back here. It was like, for the sake of the record, Jesus had to stay close enough to them to see that what they were passing on in their books and letters was accurate enough to be worthy to leave. And he in a sense said, now after this day, I don't want you to call on me any longer, because I want to go be with my Father. My Father does not need me, but I need my Father. And I want to go and serve my Father in that way. I'm going to go sit at his right hand and begin that service. And what he meant by that was, I've left all those things with you that you needed to know. I've left you those teachings. I've left you the formula that you've got to carry out that will accomplish this lesson plan and gaining strength and get you where you need to go. Now do it. Get out of your comfortable homes and your pleasant having a following of people who come to you for prophecy and so forth, and go on and do what is, as the example I said for you, and get your task over with. Now, when we said to you earlier today that in a sense you unconsciously still depend on us, we were talking about the same thing. It's like kind of holding us here. Now, you don't want to hold this hearing. You want to pass the lesson, the class, as soon as if you've been taught all the elements of the lesson plan, then you have to do the work. And you don't want to keep. It's like someone. Have you ever seen students who take an exam and they sit down during the exam period with the professor, and they keep asking the professor over and say, "Let's see, I don't understand this question number so and so. Does that mean such and such?" You know, in other words, they're fishing for the professor to give them hints. In other words, they want the professor to interpret those questions for them, so they don't put down the wrong answer. In the process, they're going to the professor give away a little bit of what would be the more right answer because they haven't done the homework adequately themselves. Now, believe it or not, we feel at this time that we have adequately given you your instructions, and that you can know how to apply. That you have to exert the effort, that you can't still take for granted that we will come and continue to correct mistakes and say, you've got to have more forethought, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. As long as we're here, we're going to do it. But at one point, we want you to be willing to take the full responsibility for coming up to the requirements of the course of gaining strength. We want you to take that full responsibility. We would like for you, if possible, it may not be possible, we would like for you to take the full responsibility and to accomplish proving that course before we seek another task. If you cannot, then we will be taken to another task, and you will have to finish that proving of completing the course of gaining strength. You will have to complete that on your own. Now, can you also see, in the same understanding, that it was not right, or your task could not be accomplished if the end result were ever proven to you prior to your accomplishing it? Can you understand it? Because then your motivation would be unnatural. You would, a gift of automatic motivation would be given to you. In other words, you would have been baited. You would have said, look, like if the next level showed you a spacecraft and even showed you a lab and said, here now, you do all this, then you'll get to travel around in these buses, and you'll get to work in these labs, and you'll get to do these kind of things. Why, you would just sail to it like nothing, because the motivation was given to you. Instead of you have to build the motivation against the odds. That's what builds strength. You have to build you have to learn your course against the odds of faith. That's trust. That's always the requirement. Now, do you understand what we're saying so far? Now, we're not here to set you up to depart, even though it would make us very happy if we left tonight. And would even make us happy for your sakes if we left tonight. Even if you went or you didn't go with us, it would make us very happy, even for your sakes. Because, let's say we did leave tonight, and you saw us leave. Don't forget, did not some of Jesus' disciples see him depart in that same way? But didn't they still get caught on a snag of not getting on to their business, of completing the course? And he even had to come back and say, you're not getting anywhere. It's like you're living on your royalties. You're resting on your laurels of having been a disciple of mine. You're going to the people where you find positive response instead of to those where you get negative response. and you're not going to get out of here that way. Now, we feel like those that finished their course, they got back and they got a good little grade and they got a good little something, says, I did my course. I mustered up the courage to do the things that I had to do, and I saw it all the way through. Now, if we left, in a sense, you would be you'd be glad to see the next level. We know you'd be thrilled. Even if only one of you and the rest of you said, oh, you hallucinated. You know, Lincoln took off in C car and you just thought it was a spacecraft. or even... well, if the spacecraft took V car up, who knows what they'll do. The point we're making is if we left and you saw it, then what you must do is work that much faster. That should be something to assist you. That doesn't mean you go out and get yourself martyred. Okay? That doesn't mean you try to do what the Jesus disciples did. That means that you do what we have taught you to do. That you get yourself, get your belt tight and live only according to procedures. Constantly examining yourself. Am I motivated by human ways? Am I letting humans come into this or that? Or am I only motivated by my desire to live 100% by procedures? Do I see the value of them? Do I like them? And so, one is that they could come and get us and take you with us. And we would all sing all the way. We would rejoice. If they came and took us and we went and you didn't, we know that you would still sing because we were able to go and you saw the next level. And you would know that you wouldn't be far behind. And that in a sense it would help spur you on. But the point is that we want you to prove yourself to your monitors. I don't need anything. I have experienced already what I need to know the value of procedures, the value of the ways of the next level. And I am going, if they saw, it's like they can measure your potential effort. And if you are giving your potential effort, and don't forget the potential of each of you increases each day. And a lot of you automatically assume that it's the same tomorrow as it was today. But if you exert all that you have today, tomorrow's potential is greater. And it's always that way. And it's like the next level will measure your readiness by your exerting in relationship to your potential into what is there. And this is why we prod you with singing, with seeming impatience, because we don't want you to sit in this hell any longer than you have. We don't like sitting in this jail as long as we've had to. We know that the kind of strength opportunity that yours is, it's more sustained, not as dramatic, but it's almost in a sense harder. This day and time, it's, believe it or not, it's not a very difficult thing to go out and act as some of the Eastern young apprentices to monks and so forth have, and do away with their lives. You know, they just throw gasoline on them, burn themselves up, and think they please their God by doing such a thing. And yours has not, your test has not required that of you. In a sense, yours has said, here's a systematic approach that teachers are going to sit you down from in meetings from the time that you're in tents to houses and so forth, and lay these out for you. And you're going to have to show through the tools we have to use that you can exert that strength and that effort. In a sense, it's harder. Your task is harder because it's easier. That's the reason it's harder. Do you understand that? Because it doesn't require as much of you. the passing of it requires as much of you. But it's not as dramatic as going out and raising continued hostility that you could get caught up in, even to the point of just you could shortchange that process by finding someone that was so hostile to you that you wouldn't even learn what you needed to learn. You just go finish it. Do you see what we're saying? You could cut that task short. This one you can't cut short. In a sense, this is an updated experiment, one that couldn't be cut short, one that isn't just an immediate display of trust to that kind of bravery, but one that is an extended test of your perseverance, your trust, and your effort to apply the things that your teachers have given to you. You understand that? Several shuttles.
You might, they'll be coming and going, I'm sure quite often. In other words, you have got to reach a certain state in your understanding and your strength and how well you have overcome the forces of this garden. Because these are not diverse forces, anything from this here garden.
And he's not saying that we know that it will happen in several stages. But your growth is going to happen. It's like some are going to reach the finish line of the requirements of the course at a time different from others. So if there's only one shuttle, it would mean that some had gotten to the finish line of what would be their passing that course, and while they were waiting for the others. Can you see that?
And they might not have to wait for the others. They might get to
That's
go.
right. We certainly don't know that there's only one pickup.
In other words, you can't think you can coast through this course. No potential member no member with the potential that you have in gaining what you need to gain on a task like this would go through such a thing and then coast through it.
Would ever feel satisfied as if I've done my adequate, I've proven myself.
Now, getting back to something does have to go. Dependent on your teachers, you might think, well, we don't depend on them very much. We have the main crack back there. We're running pretty good without TNW in it. But do you stay on the track? And we say you don't always stay on the track. You don't handle it totally the way you should. If you did, we wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. So it's the same as up here. It isn't run totally according to procedure. Even though the desire is there. We know your desire to want to do it is there, but you still do not do it as well as you're supposed to do it. So the most important thing is to be strong. You don't allow the vehicle to get away with something and then cry to the teachers to take away that thing from you so that you don't have to deal with it. The strength that you need to grow to have is that you are able to overcome that weakness of the vehicle or responses or actions, whatever it is, on your own, according to the way you've been taught. But if you think you're moving with the next 7 things in on the next level, like, oh, they didn't do that, well, you're mistaken. They're like Santa Claus. They see everything. Know when you're aware
doesn't really justify that attitude and you give into it, then that's weakness.
But if you say, I have them, but what can I do in order to continue with my task? And then do everything that you possibly can, then you're gaining strength. And you become very strong under those circumstances. And chances are any weakness that you have is there for you to gain strength from. You spray noni, for instance. I hope she doesn't. The effort that it takes for her to walk around gives her strength.
And the effort it takes for her not to let discomfort cause her to be irritable, or discomfort to cause her to be impatient, or to do less of a task than anyone else. That effort is her opportunity of developing strength.
Welcome anything that comes your way. Welcome the lessons that come your way from your teachers, even though you wish that they would develop from them again. But that can give you strength. Or you can go the other way and say, I can't do anything right. And what have you done? The programming your vehicle, your computer, in the wrong way. And sure enough, you won't do anything right, but it won't be because of you. It won't be because of your weakness.
And you program yourself to accept weaknesses.
A long time ago, we talked to members of the tough. Yeah, very tough. I don't mean tough like put up your business and fight. They can take an awful lot. You all have taken an awful lot in this class. The next level has put you all through all kinds of things. We didn't bring them up. We'd had our way. We would be sitting just like we are right now, waiting to come bankers. But they had you face extreme cold. They had you with paper bags on your head in the heat. And they had you in snake country. They had you in windy areas. They had you in every circumstance. And you stuck it out. But what you have to finish up with is so simple that it doesn't.
And even it tests you. It's just like I wish sure that sometimes the fact that we've got clothes for you recently has been a test of why in the world do we, for all those years I finally learned to not care about clothes. And here Lynx is.
Talk about cute things.
Oh no, we don't have to worry about him. He's going to be here. Well, I have to think that he's going to go back and we didn't do it. Be just his test. But we know that everything is still a test, even the most subtle things that you can't figure out why in the world they would come up to. And learning still to take your teachers from a higher level, even when we talk about things like wardrobe and whether these things go together, colors and things like that. Because you could take all that at a human level instead of realizing that that's not where we're coming from.
Well, when we took you out to purchase some of the things, the ones of you who had that test, you were tested in that way. Like Joe said, the way some in the class will be on the committee to decide how you can wear them. And that'll be a test because you may not agree. And if you don't agree with them, then that's just too bad. Right?
Let me take this clothing thing, for example, because we've experienced some extremes with students who go and taking them to get some clothing. We would say, do you like this or do you like this? And as long as they liked it, they would say, oh, whatever Lynx wants me to have, that's what I want to have. But if it was something that they didn't like, you could very quickly tell by their face that they didn't like it, that they wished it was a different color, or if it was this or was that, which showed that they still cared, which wasn't right. Then there were some on the other extreme that would say, whatever you want, and they had genuinely gone into a passive programming so that they wanted to have no dislikes to the degree that if we said, well, do you like this? Well, whatever you like. And we couldn't even get them to exert when we would ask them they had sincerely gone to the point of blocking out likes or dislikes in a wrong sense instead of in a right sense. In other words, your attitude should be, I don't really care, and I honestly don't really care what color it is, or whether it's this kind of corduroy, or it's thick cord or thin cord, or the color's too bright or the color's too... I really don't care. If you like it, I like it. But if your teacher turns to you and says, do you like it? Then you should say, well, sure, do you like it? I like it. Or, and if he says, do you really like it? Well, I want whatever you want. If I were picking it on my own, I probably wouldn't pick this color or this thing. That would be perfectly honest, because we would see your willingness and your sincere willingness to have it and not really care. But you shouldn't be so passive that you can't even check out whether or not you like it. You see what we're saying? One was one extreme, one way of showing that their likes and dislikes were still pretty strong. They only were shown when something was offered to them that they didn't like. And that was one extreme. And the other extreme was to be so passive that we couldn't even get an honest answer out of them when we'd say, do you like it? Now, can you see where that belonged in the middle?
No wonder what kind of answer I'm supposed to be. Actually, the thing that you should be concerned with is how well it fits you and if it's comfortable for you. The rest of it
Yes,
really
is it going to rip when I bend over? Or is it so? Is it too baggy, or is it too tight? Is it too full in the waist, or can I get my hands in and out of the pockets without ripping them open? In other words, that should be the main concern. It's just like a tool in your lab. Is this tool functional? If it isn't, I need another one. And that's exactly what a pair of slacks or a shirt. They're just tools, and they have to be functional. Now, we still like, when we can, to have certain number of tools in the lab have a relationship to each other in order to perform a whole task. And the same way, we wanted the garments that you wore to have a harmonious, compatible function with each other, and to fit and not to look strange or look like they were put together haphazardly. And it offered an opportunity for you to learn a little bit more about the way Next Level would approach that kind of task. So I want to talk to you.
Let me add one more thing, because what you want to do is try to look neat as a member of the group. And we have kind of bought things for you like shirts and sweaters and blouses for the females and 2 or 3 outfits in the little. So you will look neat. We never want any of you to look pretty. You know what we're saying? We don't even want you to think that you look pretty.
You're not dressing to flatter your vehicle.
Right. You're not there to attract attention because you look so cute or look so pretty. In other words, if you allow those thoughts to come in, then of course you're not handling the way a member of the exam should, and you should make yourself handle it in the right way, because that's the purpose of it, right? So never allow a influence like that to come in. What you want to do is learn how members of the Next Level will dress. They usually don't dress with concoction. And the way we understand, some were mixing colors and all that could be considered a concoction.
Plaids and stripes and garments that on at the same time.
And this is why we set down some rules, so that you will know